There's nothing in the Bible that is against large churches. There's nothing against small churches. Every church has a place, and so sometimes people think that the solution for the future is more programs, more things for children, for teens, more contemporary architecture, having a swimming pool, having a gym. I inherited a gym, which is very nice. But I am aware of a church in Plano. I won't mention the name of it, and it's huge. And they have a complex for youth, which is multi-million-dollar, and it's got all electronic games and computers and everything. But then they did something that, and I'm going to be a little critical. They did something that I think wasn't good for them in the community. They built a gigantic food court, and they have their own restaurant. And what they said to the people was, "Now we don't have to leave the church." Oh. And they ruined all the local little restaurants that were in that neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And so the view of the local restaurateurs were, well, thanks a lot. Yeah. But we're supposed to be light and salt, right? Yeah. And how can you be light and salt if you never go to where there's darkness? Right. And how can we be salt if we're not preserving things that are not working? So this is one that concerns me. The Gallup poll still shows when they ask people what do they think of clergy in terms of are they honest and ethical. 39% are answered by saying we think clergy are honest and ethical. 39%. That means 61% said they're slightly above used car salesmen, which is not really good. So you may have seen it. August 17th, there was a video that went viral. Pastor Carlton Funderburk of the Church of the Well in Kansas City. Did anybody see the video? Without mentioning it in my talk, I wanted to look at the video to make sure what they were reporting, because obviously the press can get it wrong. I watched it several times, and it was disturbing. During a service, he started saying to the congregation, "You are disgusting, you are cheap. I asked for a luxury watch." Did anybody hear this story? I asked for a luxury watch in December, and this is August, and you haven't given it to me. You know what he was asking for? He actually named it by brand. He wanted a Movado, a Gucci, or a Prada. That watch runs between $10,000 and $14,000. And this is not a mega church. Here's the problem with this. We know there are bad seeds in every profession, but that became viral. And for the almost persuaded, that is what keeps them from coming to church. They go, see, they're always out for money. We know that's not true. We know there's a lot of authentic people in ministry, pastors, associate pastors, but it gives everybody a black eye, sadly. So I'm going to ask you this question. It's kind of a rhetorical question. So what is a healthy church? And when I ask the question, I'm not asking what is the size of the congregation, what's your worship attendance numbers, what's the number of programs, what's your budget, what's the size of your staff, what's the seating capacity of your sanctuary. When I'm traveling, people say, well, tell me about your church. The first question they always ask me is, how large is it? Mm-hmm. How many people attend it? My burden is to preach the truth of the gospel to whoever God sends me. Mm-hmm. And I don't care if it's 10 people or 20. This church, when I came in, had about 65. Years ago, maybe it had 300. But I love the people God has sent us. And any pastor wants growth, quite obviously, but the reality is we put the emphasis in the wrong place. I really believe so. So let me reverse the question. What is an unhealthy church? And you probably know the answer to this. Leadership that has no vision, people that are comfortable never being challenged, members who are content to be what I call pew warmers, outreach that's never planned and never preached. And then the question becomes, how do you think of your church? And I'm very careful. When I drive up to this building, I never call it my church. It's Jesus' church. Mm-hmm. It belongs to him. He's the head of it. And I'm very careful, even when I preach, not to make the mistake of saying my church or our church. It doesn't belong to us. We're all temporary. We're just kind of passing through. And the Lord has given us the privilege of leadership for a time. Over the years, and because I don't know most of you, I can say this. So I've been a leader in churches in Chicago, Waco, Weatherford, and now here. And in every church I've been in, this is my phrase, I have run into owners. they consider themselves owners, like they've given a certain amount of money. And they'll say, that's my chair, that's my pew. And that's a mentality I don't like, because you don't own the church. And generally speaking, the people who give the most money want to control the church. And that's where you have a lot of tension. So I want to quote from Galatians this morning, the first chapter. And as Paul wrote letters to specific churches, he was trying to correct them, just sometimes gently, sometimes not. But he would see errors. And one of the things he saw with the church, with the Galatian church, that while they believed in the grace of Christ, they still thought salvation was keeping the law of Moses. Yeah. So he writes this in chapter 1, verse 6 through 9. I'm astonished that you are so quickly deserting him who called you in the grace of Christ and are turning to a different gospel. Now that there is, not that there is another one, but there are some who trouble you and want to distort the gospel of Christ. But even if we or an angel from heaven should preach to you a gospel contrary to the one we preach to you, let him be accursed. As we have said before, so now I say again, if anyone is preaching to you a gospel contrary to the one you've received, let him be accursed. One of the problems that I see with churches today and churches that aren't growing, and even churches that are growing, is they are not preaching the authentic gospel. Let me give you some examples. One is called, I'll give you the titles, but I'll explain them. Formalism. Church attendance is enough for salvation. Legalism, that salvation can be earned by keeping rules. That negates God's grace. And the biggest one for me, it has many names, but the prosperity gospel. And let me define it very simply. That God rewards those who are faithful with material wealth and health. Here's the problem. Sometimes God allows difficulties in our lives, does he not? So when he allows cancer, when you lose a job, when you have economic hardship, the implications of the prosperity gospel is that the poor are spiritually deficient. That's not the gospel. That the sick are out of God's favor. That's not the gospel. You can be sick because you're out of God's will, so that has replaced faith with what I would call positive thinking. Sometimes we call it karma. So let's do a quick attitude inventory. If our thoughts of Christ's church are unkind, or ever jealous, or bitter, or even angry, we've got to remember that everybody in the church, Jesus died for. And so we must avoid spiritual sickness. So here's a couple of research points. The Pew Research said in 2020, research is always about 1 or 2 years behind, 3,000 Protestant churches were started. Isn't that great news? 4,500 closed.
Oh, no.
So you see the discrepancy of 1,500. So what is the hope for the church? Again, the local church does not belong to the pastor or the elders or the deacons or to the congregation. It belongs to Jesus Christ. He's the head. Recently somebody was saying, well, what's our mission statement? Every corporation has a mission statement. That's okay. It's called the Great Commission.
Right.
and you really don't have to spend a lot of time working on it. And in Ephesians 4, they tell us about the evangelists, the pastors, the teachers that are needed to equip the church. And the key thing is the unity of worship, the unity of the body, building up faith, knowledge of Jesus, becoming mature in the faith. Now, I want to make a comment here about fellowship and friendship. Why do people come to church? Well, they come for different reasons. And on Sunday morning, I try to get here early and I watch the interactions. You'll have some people who show up on Sunday for nothing else. Like I do an evening Bible study, and we have other programs. They'll come to nothing else in the church but the worship service. And so there are a lot of clubs in the world. I belong to a club. Fort Worth has a camera club, and I'm a master judge there, so I belong to a club. Why is there a club? Well, we all have a similar like. Right. We all like to take photography, and we all like cameras. There are movie clubs, chess clubs, glee clubs, book clubs, hiking clubs, golf clubs. I know that sounds like a joke, but it's not, but you know what I mean. There are people who love playing bingo and poker and Keno, VFWs, Rotary, Kiwanis. We can call them a club, we can call them a lodge, you can call them a fraternity, but they all share something in common. They have the pleasure of socializing. They have shared interests. They get to meet their friends. They swap stories. They show photos of children and grandchildren. Sometimes they share a skill. It can be fishing, hunting, quilting. I know clubs where they share an occupation, where they're all in law enforcement or former military. But here's my question. This is why I say all this. Can a church become a social club? Yes, it can. And of course, there's a part of church that is social. We all need friendship. We all need fellowship. We're not meant to live the Christian life alone. One of the things that other than the disease of COVID, one of the bad effects of COVID on the church was that people started watching streaming. I just disconnected our streaming for several reasons. But one reason was I had people saying, well, I don't need to come to church anymore. I can watch you on TV. And Paul says, do not forsake the assembly, which means we have to actually be together. We could have done this today by Zoom, but you wouldn't have had this food. Okay, so that's why we didn't do Zoom. But I've had people actually say to me, well, I got 2 children. Sunday morning I have to get up. I got to dress them. You know, that's a lot of work, Pastor. Well, you did it before. You did it before, but now with COVID, you know, we had this thing where we became comfortable. Yes, there's a social aspect to church, but it is not a social club. Some of my research, you may know the name Tom Rainer and Lifeway, and there's still a basic question we ask. The basic question is, what is truth? And the Bible presents a unique look at truth. And of course, that was the big question that Pilate asked of Jesus. It was a philosophical question. What is truth? He was playing with him, of course. And Pilate never realized when he asked the question, what is truth, he was looking at truth. And he was looking at the person who said he was the truth. I am the way and the truth and the life. So the question I think a lot of people are asking today is there absolute truth? And there's only one of 2 answers. There either is or isn't. And it's got to be a truth that is true at all times, in all places, for everyone. Before I entered my theology, my grad school theology, they said I had to have a 4-year degree, accredited degree in philosophy. And I didn't understand it at first. I understand it today. So I went through 4 years of philosophy. And the thing about philosophy is you have logic, critical thinking, epistemology, which is how you learn. And today I see the wisdom of that. Because before you study theology, you've got to understand the arguments of the people out there in the world against Christianity. And so basically, a pastor is a shepherd. And a shepherd has to have wisdom to lead the flock in the right direction. To argue that there is no such thing as absolute truth is an absolute claim. So you're just contradicting yourself, right? G.K. Chesterton said this: when a man does not believe in God, he doesn't believe in nothing, he believes in anything. And, you know, there are a lot of conspiracy theories today. Somebody said, you can believe something really hard and it can still be wrong. Mm-hmm. Right. So here's an interesting stat. 41% of Americans strongly believe the Bible is just a different expression of truth. Mm-hmm. And they have put the Bible, and I find this scary, equal to the Quran, the Book of Mormon, the Torah, the Vedas, and Dianetics by L. Ron Hubbard. If you've ever read anything about L. Ron Hubbard, Scientology, he admitted he was a fraud. I mean, he actually says, you want to make money, start a religion, and he did it. And even some of the people who follow him don't even realize that he actually told you what he was doing, and they didn't realize it. I believe in a real devil, by the way. I believe in real evil. When we see these tragic school shootings, you watch the news, they talk about sociology, they talk about psychology. What they always omit is the role of the devil and evil. And C.S. Lewis said that the most cunning thing that the devil did was to believe he doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. And so we try to explain the things we see in every way. Now, I think there really is mental illness. I don't doubt that. And I think there's real evil. And I think both can happen at the same time. Mm-hmm. I think evil or a demon can enter someone who is mentally ill and use them. And so, to deny, for instance, that there's a devil is to deny that Christ encountered. He didn't encounter in the desert a metaphor. It was a real devil that he was trying to. So the other thing that I want to talk about is for many years when I was doing prison ministry, we would go into prisons. We used the 4 spiritual laws. I don't know if you ever saw that little booklet, but I got to meet the founder and a lot of wonderful people over the years. But the 4 spiritual laws, if you remember it, the little booklet starts with God has a wonderful plan for your life. The problem is when you're in a prison, somebody has a life sentence, and they open the booklet, and it starts with he has a wonderful plan for your life. You're going, really? Okay. So a pastor named Paul Chappell said this: the devil also has a plan for your life. And he expressed it in 5 words. Doubt. First of all, you question God's work. Discouragement. You focus on yourself rather than God. Diversion. You're attracted to sin. Defeat. You feel like you're a failure. And delay. You put off the Holy Spirit prompting you to do something. When churches fail, I think one of the reasons is we're not discipling people. I came from a church where it was all about the numbers count. How many people are coming forward? How many people are coming forward with no follow-up? We didn't care about how they were growing, whether they were mature in the faith. So here's another quote. Only 3 in 10 believers ever share their faith with unchurched people one-on-one. Let me say that again. Only 3 people in the church ever share their faith with an unchurched person one-on-one. That's only 29%. Only 29% of church people in America share their faith. And so here's one more quote from Chesterton. If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. You probably heard that quote before. So I'm going to say today that I believe in some truths that are non-negotiable. The divinity of Christ, the necessity for the cross, the belief in the resurrection, the second coming of Jesus, the fact that the Word of God is inspired, that the Bible is without error. I believe in the Trinity, and we're saved by faith, not by works. Those for me are non-negotiable. And if that is not the foundation of the church or a ministry, then you can go in almost any direction. Some of you have my business card. In the back of the business card says, Ephesians 2, for by grace you have been saved through faith, that not of yourselves, it's a gift from God, not of works, lest anyone boast. The reason that's my life verse is, and it's not in my bio, I lived in a monastery for 7 years. I was a Benedictine monk. So there are very few Baptist pastors that were ordained as a Catholic. Very few.
Right.
And I can tell you from experience that, of course, I was raised that way. I came out of an Italian family. I had no choice. I was an altar boy. I was Catholic. And some priest came along and said, well, you ought to give your life, to the church. You ought to be a priest. I am married and have a son because celibacy didn't work. And by the way, I knew it from the beginning. I just kept thinking, how's this going to work? And it never did work, obviously. It's a hard thing. But
you didn't have that gift.
No, I didn't have that gift, that calling. But let me say this, that I remember times, the monastery was in the northwest corner of Missouri, not near anything. It had been built like in 1840. We had this huge basilica, and I would shuffle on my knees. It took about 2 hours to get around, trying to be good enough to get to heaven, because I thought it was all on me. And the problem with that is, it's like the hamster in a wheel. After a while, you can never do enough. Yeah. You keep thinking, okay, what I can fast, I can do this, I can do that, and then I see myself as a sinner, and I won't give you the whole story, but in the monastery one day, I'm outside walking in the cornfield, and I literally ran into a telephone pole. I mean, it was there. It was so dark I didn't see it. And I looked up, and at that moment, the moon was out, and I saw the T-bar, which looked like a cross. And it was in that cornfield I gave my heart to Christ. I hugged a telephone pole and cried for hours. Then I went to my bishop, and I said, we're teaching things that aren't in the Bible. To which he said, why are you reading the Bible? He actually ordered me to stop reading the Bible. He said, we will interpret it for you. I'm standing in front of you, brothers and sisters, today, because the Holy Spirit got a hold of my heart. So do I understand Paul's conversion? Very well. Very well. Do I have a burden for Catholics, Roman Catholics? Absolutely. I have so many relatives that are Roman Catholic. But fundamentally, there was like a relief when I suddenly realized it wasn't all on me. That Christ had done it all at the cross and by grace. The final thing I want to say is one more statistic is kind of interesting. 50% of Americans, maybe church or not church, at least monthly, are thinking about trying to find more meaning and purpose in their life. That's what we can build on.
Mm-hmm.
That's what all of us as a church, as a ministry can build on. The fact that people, they know, and it was Augustine of the year 300 who said, every one of us is like a jigsaw puzzle that has a missing piece. And that piece can only be filled by God. And there are people who are dying all around us in Granbury, in Texas, in the world, who just don't know that that piece is God, and we have the answer, and we've got to share that answer. Thank you.
Thank you.